There is a type of exhaustion that does not show up on any medical chart. It does not have a name that most people recognize. It does not get talked about at family gatherings because the person experiencing it is usually the one holding the gathering together. It is the exhaustion of the eldest daughter, and if you are one, or if you love one, or if you have watched one from the outside and wondered why she seems so tired all the time, this video is for you. I am a firstborn daughter. I am also someone who has been in hiding from my own family for several years now, not because I do not care about them, but because being near them stopped being safe for me, for my mental health, and in some situations for my physical safety as well. I did not make that decision lightly. It came after more than 30 years of trying, supporting, mediating, sacrificing, and eventually arriving at the point where continuing in the same way was going to cost me everything that remained of my own life. Today I want to talk honestly about what the firstborn daughter role looks like in Filipino families, particularly in dysfunctional ones. I want to share my own experience. And I want to say the things that most eldest daughters are too exhausted, too guilt-ridden, or too afraid of being called selfish to say out loud. Let me start by describing what I mean when I say dysfunctional, because I think that word is used so broadly that it sometimes loses its meaning. In my family, dysfunction looked like a father who struggled with alcohol and substance use, and whose behavior could shift between warmth and volatility without warning. It looked like a mother whose mental health challenges went unacknowledged and untreated, whose personality made the home environment difficult to navigate, and who had a talent for drawing her children into her conflicts rather than protecting them from adult problems. It looked like a household where violence was not a rare emergency, but a recurring reality. It looked like younger siblings who needed stability and guidance that the adults in the home were not consistently able to provide. And into the middle of all of that, as the oldest child, I was expected to function as a secondary adult before I was anywhere near ready to be one. This is not a uniquely Filipino phenomenon. Research on family systems across cultures identifies what is often called the parentified child, a child who is placed, consciously or unconsciously, in a role that belongs to adults. They become the emotional manager of the household. They mediate conflicts between parents. They take on responsibility for younger siblings. They learn to suppress their own needs because the needs of everyone else are more visible and more urgent. They become fluent in reading the emotional temperature of the room and adjusting their behavior accordingly, not because someone sat down and taught them this skill, but because their survival required it. In Filipino culture specifically, this dynamic has a particular shape. The cultural value of family above self, the expectation that children will support parents in old age, the pride taken in a firstborn who is responsible and capable, all of these things are not wrong in themselves. But in a household where the adults are not functioning well, these same cultural values can become a mechanism that keeps a child trapped in service to a family that is taking far more from her than it is giving. I was 20 years old when I made the decision that I had to start supporting myself. My family was in chaos. My father had some capacity to help intermittently, enough to fund one semester of school and then another, but it was not consistent, and it could not be counted on. I ended up entering the workforce and trying to study at the same time, while also funneling whatever I could toward my younger siblings' needs. That is what I knew. That is what was expected of me. That is what I did for years. What nobody tells you, and what I want to say directly, is that this level of sustained responsibility, without reciprocal support, eventually breaks things inside a person. It breaks the ability to rest. It breaks the ability to dream for yourself specifically rather than for the family collective. It breaks the capacity to identify what you actually want as a separate human being with a separate life, because for so long your wants were irrelevant to the daily survival calculations. And when the breaking happens, which it always does eventually, the person who has been giving everything is somehow expected to recover quickly and quietly and continue giving. My physical and mental health deteriorated significantly over the years of carrying this weight. I lost my voice twice to vocal nodules, which are physical injuries caused in part by overuse and stress. I developed hypertension, high blood sugar, and high creatinine while still in my 20s. These are conditions associated with chronic stress, and a body that has been running on survival mode for too long without adequate rest, nutrition, or care. I experienced periods of depression so severe that I could not get out of bed. I reached points where I could not identify a reason to keep going that felt strong enough to keep me going. I will not go into the specifics, but I want to name it honestly. There were times when I did not want to be here. And still, during those times, there were people expecting things from me. That is the specific cruelty of the eldest daughter burden. It does not pause for your crisis. The family needs continue. The pressure continues. And somewhere inside the shame of not being able to meet everyone's expectations, you blame yourself rather than questioning the system that placed unreasonable demands on you in the first place. I want to talk about a pattern I have seen repeatedly among eldest daughters in the Philippines, not just in my own family, but in stories I have heard from others and dynamics I have observed. The eldest daughter, who is born into a struggling family, frequently ends up in one of a few trajectories. If she works abroad, often as a domestic helper or in another form of overseas employment, she sends money home. That money pays for the younger siblings' schooling, the household bills, the unexpected emergencies, and sometimes the lifestyle upgrades that other family members request with very little awareness of what it costs to earn that money. The distance and the sacrifice become invisible over time, normalized as simply what she does. If she stays in the Philippines, she often supports the family through whatever work she can find locally, while simultaneously managing the emotional and practical demands of a household that continues to rely on her. If she gets married, her husband enters a situation where he is not just marrying her, but inheriting the weight she carries, because the obligation does not transfer when she changes her name. It follows her. If she remains single, as I am, she is the one who is expected to be available. There is no partner, no separate family unit, no legitimate competing obligation that Filipino cultural logic fully recognizes as superseding the duty to family. She is single, therefore she is available. She is available, therefore she is responsible. It becomes circular and total. The irony that I've spent a long time sitting with is that my own mother was an eldest daughter. Her mother before her had children very young and relied heavily on the family structure to manage the burden of that responsibility. My grandmother, by some accounts, also ran away young, entering a relationship in her early teens before she had the maturity or the resources to understand what family responsibility would eventually require of her. These patterns move through generations, not because the women in them are weak or irresponsible, but because the systems around them consistently asked too much and offered too little, and nobody broke the cycle because nobody knew it was a cycle. They thought it was just life. When I eventually made the decision to step back, to put distance between myself and my family for the sake of my own survival, I knew what it would cost me socially. Being a Filipino eldest daughter who removes herself from the family system is not something most people understand or accept. There is a specific kind of judgment reserved for adult children who choose not to be present for parents and siblings, a judgment that assumes selfishness, ingratitude, or personal failure. It rarely asks what the person left behind, or why, or at what cost they tried to stay before deciding they could not. I am not going to spend this video justifying that decision. I have made peace with it. I know what I tried, and for how long. I know what it cost, and I know that the version of me who might have stayed, out of obligation and guilt and the fear of being called a bad daughter, would not be here making this video at all. The distance is what made continuing possible. What I want to do instead is offer something to any eldest daughter watching this who is somewhere in the middle of her own version of this story. Whether you are still inside it, exhausted and trying to figure out how much longer you can keep going, or whether you are on the other side of a decision like mine, still processing the guilt of having chosen yourself. Or whether you are years from the worst of it and trying to understand why certain things still feel so heavy. Here is what I want to say to you. The capacity you developed to manage other people's problems, to read emotional temperatures, to mediate and negotiate and hold things together, is genuinely remarkable. It is not a small thing, but it was forged under conditions that never asked your permission. You did not choose to become skilled at holding a family together. You became skilled because the alternative was chaos that nobody else was stepping forward to manage. That skill is real and it has value, but it does not mean you owe the rest of your life to its continued application in situations that are not healthy for you. Your needs are real. They were real when you were a child who had to suppress them, and they are real now. The fact that you have spent years operating as though your needs were secondary does not make them less legitimate. It makes addressing them more urgent. You are allowed to want things for yourself. a career, a form of rest, a relationship on your own terms or none at all, a life that has room in it for your own preferences and dreams, and the things that make you feel like a person rather than a function. Wanting those things is not betrayal. It is basic humanity. And you are allowed to grieve what the role cost you. The years of studying that were interrupted. The relationships that could not develop properly because you were always needed somewhere else. The health that deteriorated under pressure. The version of yourself that might have existed if the circumstances had been different. That grief is real, and it deserves acknowledgement, not minimization. I am in my late 30s. I have health conditions that most people twice my age have not yet developed. I have a complicated history with every institution that was supposed to protect me, my family, my school system, my religious community, even my own body. I have not finished my degree. I have not had a relationship in many years. I am living in a small, partially damaged room with my dogs, building something small and quiet and genuinely mine for the first time in my life. And I think, given everything, that is not a failure. That is a person who finally decided that her remaining years were worth living for herself, rather than spending them in service to a system that was never going to give back what it took. My paternal grandmother lived on her own land in the mountains until her early 70s. She grew her own food. She had her own animals. She was, by all the accounts I heard as a child, a person who ended up with a life that had some peace in it. That image has stayed with me. I do not know if I will reach that. My health makes it uncertain, but I want to try. And for the first time in my life, trying for my own future does not feel like selfishness. It feels like the most reasonable thing I could possibly do. If you are an eldest daughter, or if you know one, I hope something in this video helped. Not to make you angrier than you already are. Not to give you permission to do something you are not ready for. Just to feel for a few minutes that what you have been carrying is real, that someone else sees it, and that you are not wrong for being tired. Thanks for watching. If this conversation resonated with you, please consider hitting the subscribe button. I am currently working toward my goal of 1,000 subscribers, so I can finally monetize this channel and turn this passion into a sustainable part of my future. This is my unfiltered diary of solo living in the Philippines, from the long days in the ESL classroom to my journey as a beginner learning Japanese and Korean. Your support helps me build my retirement fund and keeps this channel growing. If you would like to help out even more, you can check out the Buy a Treat for My Pets link in the description. My dogs definitely appreciate the love. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss the next update. Thank you for being such an important part of this journey. I will see you in the next one.